Welcome to Revenge Tragedy. This story takes place in a quiet, manicured suburb of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where lawns are measured with rulers and secrets are hidden behind double pane glass. My name is Danielle Harwell. I'm 29 years old, and honestly, until last week, I thought the act of moving out would be the quietest, most peaceful moment of my entire life. I was wrong. I packed my things the way you pack when you're trying to disappear. You know the method. Boxes taped tight so they don't rattle, shoes wrapped in old hoodies to muffle the sound, my laptop bag hugged to my chest like a shield. I moved like a ghost in the house I had lived in for nearly 3 decades. I waited until the driveway was empty, until the coast was clear. I rolled my last box down the concrete, the wheels humming against the pavement. And for a fleeting moment, I felt it. Relief. Pure, intoxicating relief. I started the car. I backed out. I drove away. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was a specific vibration, 3 short bursts. A notification. Someone had tagged me on Facebook. Now, you have to understand my family dynamic to understand my reaction. I opened the app expecting a petty joke. Maybe a passive-aggressive meme about ungrateful children, or one of those minion quotes my mother loves to share when she wants to hurt you without admitting it. Instead, I saw a photo. It was a picture of the driveway I had just pulled out of 5 minutes ago. In the background, you could see my old bedroom window, dark and empty. And the caption, it made my stomach drop so fast I actually felt dizzy. Finally, the freeloader is gone. Cheers to a quieter house and a lower grocery bill. At first, I left. It was a dry, shocked sound. It felt too cruel to be real. It felt like a villain monologue in a bad movie. But then my eyes drifted down to the engagement numbers. 1,230 for likes, 1,000 to 100, and 30 for people. They didn't just see it, they were celebrating it. And the comments, they were stacking up like bricks in a wall built to crush me. There was my mother's comment, pinned to the top. No more cooking or laundry for a failure. Mama needs a vacation. There was my dad. He didn't type a single word, which almost would have been kinder. Instead, he had liked a comment from a stranger that said, unemployed people should learn to live on their own or starve. That was the part that made my hands stop shaking. It wasn't the insult. It was the certainty behind it. The way they all agreed on who I was without knowing a single true thing about my life. I sat in my car, parked on the shoulder of the road. And I scrolled. I read every name. I read every haha reaction. And then, I did something that would have looked pathetic to anyone watching. I liked the comments back, every single one, because I needed them comfortable. I needed them proud. I needed them to believe they had finally won, that they had successfully shamed the freeloader on their hair. I put my phone down, drove to my new apartment, sat on the floor surrounded by unopened boxes, and made one decision that changed the trajectory of our lives forever. If you think this story is just about a cruel Facebook post, you're missing the point. That post was just the match. The gasoline had been pouring for years. To understand why their confidence collapsed so spectacularly, you have to understand the secret they had been hiding even from themselves. When people read that post, they assumed I was kicked out. They assumed I was mooching off my hard-working parents, sleeping until noon, eating their groceries, drifting through life with zero shame. That's the story my family has been selling to the neighbors, the church group, and the extended family. For years, it's a convenient story. It makes them look like saints, hardworking, patient, burdened by a lazy daughter. It makes me the punchline. But here is the truth that never fit their narrative. That house, that beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs, it was never really theirs. It wasn't some magical reward they earned through grit and savings. It was a gift they were allowed to borrow. And they spent years pretending the owner didn't exist. Even while I was sitting right there at the kitchen table. My grandmother on my mom's side, Lorraine, was the only person in that entire bloodline who looked me in the eye and actually saw me. Lorraine was blunt, old school, and allergic to excuses. She was the kind of woman who checked the expiration dates on milk and checked the logic in your arguments with equal scrutiny. When I was a kid, she would show up with a grocery bag, take one look at our pantry, and start asking questions that made my mom's smile tighten into a grimace. Lorraine didn't hate my mom. She hated what my mom did with money. She hated the retail therapy, the shopping sprees that turned into towers of Amazon boxes on the porch every week, the weekend getaways charged to credit cards like consequences were optional, the way my mom would borrow from Lorraine with a sweet, trembling voice and a promise to pay her back, and then act deeply offended when Lorraine actually asked for the money 2 months later. I didn't understand the financial mechanics of it when I was 8 and my parents moved us into Lorraine's rental property. I just knew the neighborhood had sidewalks, the backyard had a swing set, and for the first time, I had my own room. My sister, Sarah, treated the house like a kingdom she'd inherited by divine right. My parents treated it like proof they had made it. Lorraine treated it like a test they were failing. When Lorraine died, I was 22. I remember sitting in a stiff funeral dress, watching my mother cry. She wailed. She threw herself over the casket to the room. It looked like heartbreak, but I had lived with her long enough to know the difference between grief and panic. I had seen her cry the same way when the credit card bill came, or when the car broke down. She wasn't crying for her mother. She was crying because her safety net was gone. The week after the funeral, the lawyer called a meeting. I went because I thought I had to sign a guest book or something. My mom went because she assumed she was collecting a check. My sister came along because she never misses a chance to feel important or be the center of a tragic aesthetic. We sat in a mahogany paneled office that smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who had eyes like a hawk, slid a folder across the desk. He spoke quietly. He said Lorraine had made her decision regarding the estate years ago, and she had been very, very specific. The house was left to me. Not my mom, not my dad, not split between siblings. Me. My mother's face changed so fast I still remember it like a jump cut in a horror movie. Confusion, then anger, then a weird, frozen smile that didn't reach her eyes. Henderson explained the condition. My parents and my sister could live there as long as they wanted. No deadline, no eviction hanging over them for simply existing. Lorraine didn't want them homeless, but ownership, the deed, the title, that belonged to me, legally and fully. Lorraine had documented it explicitly because, as she put it in her will, she did not trust her daughter not to refinance the roof over her head into oblivion. I should have spoken up right then. I should have asserted myself. But I was 22, grieving, and raised in a household where being good meant being quiet. So I nodded. I signed where they told me, and I went home to a house everyone still called theirs. Within a month, the amnesia set in. My mom was hosting backyard barbecues like nothing had happened, giving neighbors tours of the kitchen like she'd paid for the granite countertops with her own sweat. My dad started talking about remodeling the bathroom, knocking down walls. My sister bragged about our place on Instagram as if it was her personal achievement. And then came the part that makes my stomach twist when I say it out loud. I started paying rent $250 a month, every month, for 7 years, not because anyone forced me with a contract, but because my mother would sigh at the kitchen table, shuffling bills, and say, "Things are so tight this month, Danny, we're all drowning." She'd look at me like I owed her for the air I was breathing, like my existence was the line item that was breaking the bank. So I paid while the DoorDash bags kept showing up on weekends. I paid while the Netflix, Hulu, and HBO subscriptions stayed active. I paid while my mom bought new farmhouse sheet decor for the living room and posted it online with captions about her hard work. And every time I tried to remind myself I was the owner, the word felt ridiculous in my mouth. Like a lie I wasn't allowed to tell. In that house, ownership didn't matter, only power did. And I had none. From the outside, it was easy to label me a failure. I was always home. I was always on my laptop. I was rarely dressed in business casual. To my family, that was all the evidence they needed. In their minds, real work meant a uniform, a bus, a commute, and a schedule they could brag about too. The neighbors, anything else, was just playing on the computer. What they never bothered to learn because they never asked was that my bedroom had quietly become my headquarters. For 5 years, while they mocked me, I was working as a freelance conversion copywriter and e-commerce funnel strategist. I wasn't playing games. I was writing product pages, crafting email campaigns, building landing pages, and designing ad copy for brands that paid very, very well. I helped a boutique candle shop double their online sales in 3 months. I rewrote the checkout flow for a fitness studio franchise that was bleeding customers. I didn't do it for exposure. I did it for contracts. I did it for invoices. I did it for direct deposits that went straight into a high-yield savings account no one else had access to. I kept it quiet on purpose, not because I was ashamed, but because every time I tried to explain, my mom would wave her hand and say, "Sitting at a computer all day isn't a real job. Honey, you need benefits." My sister went further. She told her friends I was probably doing something sketchy online camgirl stuff, or scams, the kind of comment disguised as a joke, but designed to stick like tar. After that, I stopped correcting anyone. I bought a mini fridge for my room so I didn't have to go to the kitchen and be accused of eating their food. I did my laundry at 2 a.m. to avoid comments about me using their water. I skipped family dinners. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the invisibility. When my boyfriend at the time, Tyler, found out I was still living at home at 28, the disappointment in his eyes was palpable. He tried to be polite, but he couldn't hide it. He said he couldn't see a future with someone who hadn't lunched yet. I tried to explain the situation with the house. I tried to tell him, no, you don't understand, I own it. But he didn't want a complex story. He wanted a partner who fit the mold. So he left, and my family treated his departure like proof they had been right all along. See, even he knows you're a loser. What none of them saw was that while they were judging, I was planning. I gave myself 18 months. I didn't want to leave in a panic. I wanted a sniper shot exit. Clean, irreversible. I tracked every dollar. I built a cash buffer big enough to survive a nuclear winter. I bought an apartment small, clean, and mine near Columbus. I didn't tell a soul. I signed the papers on a Tuesday, got the keys on a Thursday, and spent weeks moving my life out in backpacks and tote bags so no one would notice the volume decreasing. The day I rented the small truck for the furniture was the day the illusion finally broke. My mom pulled into the driveway just as I was loading my desk chair. She got out of her car, saw the truck, and her face tightened. "What are you doing?" she asked, like I needed a permit to leave. "I'm moving out," I said. My sister appeared in the doorway, phone already in hand. Sensing drama, my dad stood behind them, watching like a judge. "With what money?" My sister laughed. "I have work," I said calmly. "Real work. I've had it for years." My dad scoffed. "We'll see you back here in a month when you run out of cash." I didn't argue. I didn't show them my bank balance. I just closed the truck door, got in the driver's seat, and drove away. I felt the air fill my lungs. I felt free. And then, buzz, 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 the Facebook notification. I stared at the screen. 1,230 for likes. My mother's comment about the laundry. My dad's like on the starve comment. I sat on the floor of my new apartment, the silence ringing in my ears. I could have cried. I could have commented back and started a war right there in the comment section. But then I looked over at my backpack, where I kept my important documents. Inside was a folder I had never shown them. the deed to the house, the probate paperwork, the letter from Mr. Henderson. I wiped my eyes. I stood up, and I decided that if they wanted to treat me like a stranger, I would introduce them to the landlord. A week later, my screen lit up like a fire alarm. 20 dash for missed calls, 33 messages, voicemails, voice notes. Frantic apologies that didn't sound like apologies at all. They sounded like panic. They wanted to talk. They needed something. And that's when I knew I timed it perfectly. See, I didn't send the paperwork immediately. I didn't react on day one. I let them have their week of victory. I let them bask in the glow of those 1,234 likes. I let them sit in that house, comfortable and smug, telling each other how much better life was without me dragging them down. I needed them confident. I needed them to believe they had one so thrilly that they never saw the floor dropping out from under them. On the 7th day, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up clear. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder I'd been building for years, the one titled House. Inside was everything: the deed, the probate paperwork, the attorney's letter from 7 years ago, and the email from Mr. Henderson confirming exactly what my grandmother intended. I printed everything, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because paper has a way of ending arguments that feelings can't. Then I drove to the post office. I sent a certified letter to my parents' address, my house, with signature required. I also forwarded the same notice by email so nobody could claim they never saw it or that it got lost in the mail. It wasn't a threat. It was a formal statement of reality. I wrote that I was the legal owner of the property. I reminded them that their right to stay there had always been conditional on respectful occupancy, and I stated that, from this point forward, we would be handling our relationship the way adults handle business, in writing, with clear terms and strict deadlines. I gave them to options: one. Sign a month-to-month lease at fair market rent, with all utilities transferred into their names by a specific date. Vacate the property according to the legal notice period. No yelling, no insults, just choices. I hit send on the email, set my phone face down, and went back to sipping coffee in a quiet apartment that belonged to me. The first call came less than 10 minutes later, then another. Then my phone started vibrating so hard it walked itself across the table. My mom's texts were a whiplash of emotions. First came the shock. What is this? Is this a joke? Then the guilt. How could you do this to us? Are you trying to kill your father with stress? Then the deflection. You're being manipulated by someone. Family doesn't do this to family. My dad left 3 voicemails in a row. Each one was colder than the last, attempting to summon an authority he no longer held. He demanded I come over immediately. He said he was going to get a lawyer to look at this garbage. He told me I didn't understand what I was doing, speaking to me like I was a toddler playing with a loaded gun. My sister, Sarah, she didn't sound scared at first. She sounded offended. She messaged me like I'd embarrassed her at a party, not like she'd just tried to humiliate me in front of the entire internet. Okay, you made your point. Can you stop now? You're being so extra. When I didn't respond, her tone shifted. She sent voice notes with that fake, breathless laugh she uses when she's losing control of a conversation. It was just a joke. Danny, my God, everyone jokes. Why are you like this? Why do you have to ruin everything? Then my aunt jumped in because of course the extended family had been summoned. I got a long, flowery message about gratitude and respect and how my grandmother would be ashamed of me, which was almost funny, considering my grandmother is the specific reason I had the power to do any of this. Lorraine would have probably been sitting next to me, eating popcorn. I listened to every voicemail once. I read every message once. I didn't let the guilt sink in. I didn't let the old programming take over. Finally, I replied with one sentence, and I attached one image. The image was a screenshot of the Facebook post. Their words, their names, their likes, their laughter. I wrote, You called me a freeloader in public. Now you can be independent in private. My mom called immediately, sobbing so hard I could hear her struggle to breathe. But even through the tears, I heard the manipulation trying to find a foothold. She said, "You know, I didn't mean it like that. You know, your sister is just dramatic. People will talk, Danny. How does this look?" And then, the kicker, how am I supposed to pay for everything? That was the moment. That was the clarity. They weren't calling because they missed me. They weren't calling because they were sorry. They were calling because the safety net, the one they had been bouncing on while spitting on, it had finally snapped. I told her calmly, "I gave you options. Pick one." Then I hung up, and for the first time in my life, their silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like peace. 2 days after the notice went out, I sent the lease. This wasn't a handwritten note on a napkin. This was a real, standard Ohio residential lease agreement. I drafted it using a template landlords use when they want everything. Enforceable. The rent was set at $2,550 a month. Now, before you say that's cruel, that is exactly what a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a large yard cost in that suburb. I wasn't gouging them. I was quoting the market, but I included a simple line item requirement that mattered more than the money. All utilities must be transferred into the tenants' names by the deadline. Electric with AEP Ohio, gas with Columbia Gas, internet with Spectrum. C. I had been the one listed on those accounts for years. Why? Because it was easier. Because I was the one who knew how to set up autopay. Because my mom would say she'd handle it, forget. And then panic when the disconnect notice came in pink envelopes. So, I had taken it over. I had kept the lights on, the house warm, and the Wi-Fi running while they sat on the couch and mocked me. I wasn't doing that anymore. I wrote the deadline in bold. I sent it by email and certified mail again. You have 10 days to sign and return, or to provide written notice of your move-out plan. The response I got wasn't negotiation. It was an insult disguised as a family discussion. My dad texted me, "That's ridiculous. We are not paying our own daughter rent. You are out of your mind." My mom sent paragraphs about how I was greedy and grateful and punishing them for a harmless joke. My sister tried a different angle, the social pressure. She told me I was making her look bad. She said people were messaging her, asking why I would do this. Then, she offered me $400. $400. She offered it like she was doing me a favor, like I was the tenant begging to stay in the corner room. That's when I realized they weren't just refusing to respect me. They honestly believed I would fold. They believed that if they just waited, if they just bullied me enough, I would revert to the quiet, helpful Danny who paid for everything and apologized for existing. So, I made sure the next step didn't rely on their belief. I went public. I posted exactly once. No rant, no name calling, no emotional diatribe. Just a short, clean statement on my own profile to clarify a misunderstanding. I included a photo of the deed with my personal info redacted, but the county stamp clearly visible. Next to it, I put the screenshot of the freeloader post. I wrote, "I've been quiet for years, but I'm done letting people rewrite reality." If you laughed at that post, you laughed at a truth you didn't know. I own the house. I have allowed my family to live there rent-free for 7 years while I paid rent to them. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't beg for sympathy. I'm just setting the record straight. I let the receipts speak. The shift was immediate, and it was violent. People who had clicked like on my sister's post without thinking started commenting things like, "Wait, you own the house?" And they posted that. A couple of neighbors I barely knew messaged me privately, apologizing for the haha reaction they'd left, saying they had no idea. And my sister, who lived for the dopamine hit of a notification, went strangely, beautifully quiet. Nothing hurts a narcissist like losing the audience. She couldn't spin this. The deed was a public record. The lie was too big to patch up. Behind the scenes, the family escalated to nuclear levels. My mom threatened to tell everyone I was mentally unstable. My dad said he'd contest the will, which was a bluff, since probate closed years ago. My aunt called again, using that syrupy voice. Honey, just take the post down. Your mother is embarrassed. Just let this go. I asked my aunt one question. Are you offering to pay their rent? Or are you offering to take them in? There was a long pause. That's not what I meant, Danielle, she snapped. Exactly, I said. The deadline came. The deadline went on. No sign lease, no utility transfers, no move-out plan, just more messages that sounded like they were written to win an argument, not to solve a housing crisis. So I did exactly what I said I would do. I called AEP Ohio. I scheduled the electric service in my name to be disconnected. I called Columbia Gas and did the same. I called Spectrum and canceled the internet account attached to that address. It wasn't revenge in the cinematic sense. I wasn't slashing tires. It was the natural consequence of refusing to be responsible. If they wanted to live like adults, they could open their own accounts like adults. The morning the shutoffs took effect, my phone exploded again. My mom called screaming. She said the house was freezing. She said the stove wouldn't light. She said my dad couldn't work without the internet. She screamed that I was ruining their lives. My sister left a voice note that was half crying, half furious. This is insane, Danny. You're actually insane. I can't believe you turned the power off. My dad didn't yell this time. He sounded panicked in a way I'd never heard before. It was the sound of a man realizing his authority was a currency that was no longer accepted. Please, he said, just turn it back on. We'll talk. We'll figure it out. That word, talk, hit me like a bad joke. Talking was all they had done for years. Talking over me, talking down to me, talking about me. I sent one message, the same message to all of them. The accounts were in my name. I gave you a deadline to transfer them into yours. You chose not to. You are free to call the utility companies and set up new service whenever you want. But they didn't, because that would require a deposit. That would require credit checks. That would require money they had spent on image instead of reality. Instead, they did what I knew they'd do the moment inconvenience got real. They ran. They packed suitcases. They grabbed what they could, and they dragged their pride down the street to my aunt's house. Suddenly, the people who had called me a freeloader were sleeping on someone else's sectional sofa. My sister started posting vague quotes about betrayal and toxic people, but the comments weren't going the way she wanted anymore. Her friends were asking, wait, aren't you staying at your aunt's now? My mom tried to pull the victim card at work, borrowing money from a coworker to cover a bill. But word travels fast in a suburb. The truth was catching up. They kept telling each other this was temporary. They told my aunt I would come to my senses in a few days. They said family always caves. But they didn't know the new me. The old me was the girl who paid rent to live in her own house. The new me had paperwork, deadlines, and a calm that scared them more than anger ever could. And by the time they realized I wasn't bluffing, they had already burned the only bridge that could have taken them home. By the time they realized I wasn't bluffing, they had already burned the only bridges that could have saved them. My dad kept talking about lawyers. He'd pace around my aunt's living room more, so I heard talking about contesting the will, about grandparents' rights, which didn't apply, about how a judge would never let a daughter do this to her own parents. He said it like the court system ran on shame and tradition, not statutes. He genuinely believed that if he just stood in front of a judge and looked disappointed in me, the gavel would swing in his favor. But the real world doesn't care about who feels entitled. It cares about paperwork. It cares about deadlines. It cares about whether you followed the process. I had followed the process religiously. Every notice was documented. Every certified letter was tracked. Every conversation that mattered had been moved to email when I filed for the formal eviction because they still technically had possessions in the house and refused to officially surrender the keys. I didn't do it with anger. I did it the way you file taxes. I did it the way you sign a contract. It was administrative because at that point, This wasn't a family argument anymore. It was a boundary enforcement. They had made it impossible for me to believe in anything softer. The day the court date came, they showed up dressed like they were going to a church fundraiser. They thought appearances could erase years of disrespect. My mom had that tight, practiced expression she uses when she wants sympathy from strangers, the long-suffering mother look. My sister walked in like she still had an audience, chin lifted, phone in her hand, eyes scanning the room like she was looking for a camera. My dad tried to stand a little too close to me in the hallway, looming, the way he used when I was younger, like his physical presence alone was enough to control the outcome. When we were called up, the judge didn't ask how we felt. He didn't ask for a sob story. He asked for documents. That was the moment my family's confidence started to crack. My dad's voice got louder, then softer, then finally shaky as he tried to explain that it was his house because he'd lived there. My mom tried to cry, dabbing at dry eyes. My sister tried to talk over me, correcting details that didn't matter. I didn't raise my voice once. I simply handed over the certified mail receipts. I handed over the lease offer they refused to sign. I handed over the utility transfer deadline notices. And, just for context, I included the screenshots of the public posts that proved why we weren't doing this informally anymore. The judge flipped through the pages. He didn't react emotionally, but I saw the shift. He looked at the timeline. He looked at the offers I had made, fair market rent, ample time. They were given options, the judge said, looking over his glasses at my father. They ignored them. The order came through. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. Possession granted to the plaintiff. But to them, to my family, it felt like the ground moving under their feet. Outside the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, her nails digging through my sleeve. Her voice went low and urgent, abandoning the poor me act for pure and filtered guilt. "You're really going to do this?" she hissed. "You're going to ruin us." My sister was behind her, hissing that I was evil, that I was jealous, that I was a bitter, lonely person. My dad stepped in and told me to be reasonable, as if he hadn't just spent a month ignoring every reasonable offer I'd made. I looked at my mother's hand on my arm. I didn't pull away violently. I just removed her hand, finger by finger, with a slowness that felt like finality. "I offered you a lease," I said. "I offered you time. You chose pride, then I walked away." The weirdest part was how quiet I felt. I had expected to feel triumphant, like I'd won the Super Bowl, or devastated, like I'd just orphaned myself. Instead, I felt steady, like a person who finally stopped carrying a backpack full of rocks they didn't realize they were wearing the day they had to retrieve the rest of their things. It wasn't some dramatic scene where I stood in the driveway and watched with a smirk. I wasn't interested in that kind of victory. I stayed inside my own life. I sent a moving crew I'd hired paid for out of my own pocket to move their remaining heavy furniture to storage, just to get it done. But I did come by briefly after they were gone. I needed to inspect the property. My dad had avoided eye contact with the movers. My mom had apparently moved around the house like she wanted to punish the walls, slamming drawers, muttering, acting like every object belonged to her simply because she had touched it. When I walked through the empty rooms, I noticed how much of my childhood had been shaped by that house. I noticed the dining room where I learned to walk on eggshells. I noticed the kitchen where my mom complained about cooking for me while ordering sushi for herself. I noticed the living room where my sister sat on the couch, laughing at comments about me, treating me like a prop in her life. I didn't cry. I took photos for documentation. I locked the doors, and I left. The house had been a cage for too long, even when I technically owned it. I wasn't going to stay attached to it just because it was familiar. My family's downfall wasn't instant, like a movie where the villain explodes. It was a slow leak. It was the satisfying, quiet reality of economics. When you spend years living off someone else's silence, you forget how expensive life is when the bill finally comes due. They moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, the kind my sister used to mock when she saw people posting photos of starter home. East online. No backyard. No bonus room. No space for my mom to host her little barbecues and pretend she was the queen of the call-d-sack. My dad started driving for Uber and doing delivery apps. He had to. The pride he wore like armor didn't pay the rent. My mom took a part-time job at a big box store. She told anyone who would listen that her daughter had abandoned her, carefully leaving out the part where she called me a failure in public and expected me to keep funding her lifestyle. But the thing about small talk is that people eventually ask questions. And when the borrowing pattern surfaced at her new job, she was quietly moved to fewer hours. My sister tried to keep her social media image intact, but it didn't hit the same when the background changed from a nice suburban house to a cramped living room with second-hand furniture. People noticed, and for once, she couldn't control what they believed. The most satisfying part wasn't watching them struggle. It was watching the world stop rewarding their cruelty. The same friends who had laughed at that Facebook post started distancing themselves, not because they suddenly became saints, but because nobody wants to be associated with someone who humiliates their own sister for likes and then gets exposed by public records. My sister would post a dramatic quote about loyalty, and the comments would be dead silent. My aunt tried to keep the pressure machine running. She'd call and lecture me about forgiveness, and I'd ask the same question every time. Are you paying their rent? Are you letting them move in long term? The answer was always silence. That's when I understood the pattern clearly. The people who demand you sacrifice the most are always the ones who volunteer the least. Even my ex, Tyler, tried to come back. The timing was almost insulting. He messaged me like nothing had happened. Like the moment he saw I had stability assets, he suddenly remembered my name. He said he'd been thinking about me and hoped I was doing okay. Then he slid in a comment about how impressive it was that I handled the house situation. Translation: now that you look successful, I'm interested again. I blocked him without responding. That small click felt like closing a door I should have shut years ago. After the eviction, I made the last decision that cut the cord completely. I sold the house. People think that's the harshest part. They think I should have kept it as a simple or rented it out to strangers for income. But keeping it would have kept me connected to them, to the memories, to the constant possibility of them driving by, staring at the windows, trying to crawl back in. I didn't want leverage. I wanted freedom. I listed it properly through an agent, and when the sale went through, I didn't celebrate with a big party. I sat at my kitchen table in my apartment, stared at the confirmation on my laptop screen, and felt something in my chest loosen. I used the money the way my family never did. I invested back into my business. I upgraded my equipment. I paid for professional training. I hired an accountant so my taxes were airtight. And I built a real emergency fund because I never wanted to live in fear of one bad month again. I also did something that surprised me. I paid for therapy, not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to carry their voices into my future. I didn't want to keep hearing freeloader in my head every time I took a break. I didn't want to keep second-guessing myself every time I said no. Healing, I learned, isn't soft. It's disciplined. It's choosing yourself over the version of you that was trained to shrink. People ask if I feel guilty. I don't. I feel sad sometimes. I feel sad because I didn't want a war. I wanted a family. I wanted parents who were proud of me, not parents who saw me as an ATM or a punching bag. But love without respect is just control in a nicer outfit. And family isn't a free pass to humiliate you, use you, and then demand your silence when you finally push back. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They are self-respect. Consequences aren't revenge. They are education. My sister thought a Facebook post would be her victory lap. She wanted applause. She wanted everyone to agree that I was the problem. What she didn't understand is that when you bully someone in public, you are also putting yourself on trial in public. The moment I stopped protecting their image, the moment I showed the truth without screaming, their whole story collapsed. I didn't have to ruin them. They did it to themselves. All I did was stop saving them from the results. If there's one lesson I hope sticks, with anyone listening. It's this: don't confuse kindness with permission. Don't confuse silence with weakness. And never build your confidence on humiliating someone who is quietly learning how to stand. Because one day, they will stand. And when they do, your likes and comments won't protect you from the real world. Our team at the channel Revenge Mangan is dedicated to creating meaningful and engaging fictional scripts designed to entertain while delivering thoughtful lessons. All stories on this channel are purely fictional and created with the purpose of sharing educational values and positive messages with viewers. This story highlights the importance of self-respect, personal boundaries, and accountability within family relationships. It shows that silence does not mean weakness, and that standing up for oneself can be done calmly, legally, and with integrity. Through its emotional journey, the script encourages viewers to reflect on how words, actions, and public humiliation can carry lasting consequences.